Guys, here is a top 10 list of manhwa that did not meet expectations. These are all manhwa that started off pretty solid and showed a lot of promise, and then just fell off a cliff of boredom or just went in directions that were not interesting whatsoever. These are not in any particular order, so keep that in mind, but these manhwas were all disappointments. Some of them I still read, I'm not gonna lie. However, I cannot deny that the enjoyment has not done nothing but drop since I started. At number 10, we have Max Level Hero Has Returned. This manhwa started off pretty strong with an interesting-ish concept. Character gets betrayed by his family, he's in a coma, he's on the edge of dying, and ends up being in this otherworldly place where he gets trained by the strongest in history in all the different fields, from botany to swordsmanship to magic to all these different things, and he comes back to the world, gets his little revenge story, and the dynamics are cool. Like the idea of a character that's this strong, but also there's this political play as well as a revenge storyline. There's these vampire-like monsters. There's a lot of stuff to like at the beginning of the story, but that's it. It falls off a cliff. Oh my lord, does it. It just shows how your character needs to have some weaknesses, and the main character of the story has none. He's inept in some social situations, but like even that's far and rare from happening, and God, what a disappointment. If you read this, you kind of know what I mean by he's in a bunch of situations and he always has the, oh yeah, I learned this amazing skill from this one warrior that trained me so long ago. Oh, there's a virus, I have the solutions for the... Yeah, spoilers, I'm spoiling stuff, but it's just so disappointing. Guys, if you love this manhwa, I'm curious to see down below what it is that keeps you engaged with it, or do you read it but you kind of recognize its faults and what it is. For me, I can't stand a character who's just good at everything unless there's something that it's giving me more. Number 9 is Soul Station Druid. I don't know what it is. It's kind of weird because it's a little bit hard to pinpoint where it fell off the cliff for me. Because when Soul Station Druid started, I was totally into it. Actually, I've recommended it many times on this channel because Soul Station Druid started super strong with a character transported to another world. Okay, that's not exactly original. And he spends 10,000 years in that world before he returns to Earth, where only 10 years have passed. And he's ridiculously powerful, but in kind of a unique way for the world. It's not like he's a magic... Well, there is magic involved, but the big thing is he becomes this kind of brute, really strong. He's really in touch with animals and stuff like that, and there's these animalistic transformations that take place, and maybe it's the furry feel of the series that just doesn't work for me, but there's something about the way the story is told and the way the power set is done, the way these breaches happen, and also the fact that, I don't know, the storyline is so disconnected and jumping from place to place that it's just not a great story. At number 8, we have Return of the Unrivaled Spearknight. This one makes me actually legitimately sad because this was in my... It made it up to my top 5 for a while. Like, and the irony is the thing that I dislike about it was the thing I was excited for before. A character gets betrayed, he gets sent back in time, he's on the warpath to get revenge and protect the family members that he lost along the way. You know the storyline. And he goes through this night school, he fights against these kids that think he's like nothing because he's not from like the main families and stuff like that. We've seen these stories before, but it was done really well. The fighting was really cool. Combat was with the spear, which was a little different. And I was just excited for the time jump because according to the visuals that you had for like the front pages of the story, you saw that, well, there was going to be a time jump at one point because you see the older version of him that's there. But when the older version happens, they're basically jumping into a new storyline that you kind of have a huge gap that occurred that you don't have the details of. He's built up a reputation, he's built up his strength, he's better in many different ways, there's political stuff going on, and it just becomes like a different series to a certain extent, which I would have been fine, but there was a necessary build up to get there. And it basically started off as a very small, in the school kind of story, with some people coming after him for various reasons, and became this larger war, like, landscape kind of organization thing. Actually, similar to what Chronicles of Heavenly Demon did not that long ago, where things went into a warscape, but I think they did it a lot more in steps of getting there, and they've still managed to keep the story small despite being big, where this one has not done a good job with. At number 7 is the game I came from. I don't know why the game I came from was so enjoyable to me. From the beginning, it was never a well-written series, but it did something really well. It did like a MMORPG world really interestingly, where basically there's shared stats between your stats in the game and your stats in real life, and there's this whole returner kind of angle to this as well, of a character getting a second chance, blah, blah, blah. But it's not a well-written series. It never was. It seems like it's written by someone that's very young. The interactions feel very basic. It's very friendship is the power kind of storyline. But to be honest, I was kind of into that. I was into everything involved and the depths of the systems. But the problem the story kind of has is a bit of a lack of overarching focus to the story. There's no real direction other than strength building, which is something I feel like Overgeared often has an issue with as well. It's like quest of the week kind of thing. And while there's some interesting fights, some interesting dynamics that get built between the characters, nothing is deep, nothing is well written, and the lack of an overarching story to bring everything together just feels like it's not worth reading anymore. And I dropped this one, unfortunately, and I was enjoying it quite a bit. It was one of the ones I was always running to check the new chapters that were released. At number 6, we have Return of the 8 Circle Mage. This is a manhwa that actually fell off the deep end quite quickly for me. It came out really near Return of the Unrivaled Spearknight, and they were both like manhwa that I was really enjoying. However, very quickly, from the first chapters, you have a character that was betrayed. He was a mage. He goes back in time. He starts his path of revenge as a child. He wants to protect the family that he lost along the way. Except the thing with this one is it has an identity issue, like a huge identity issue. Because when it starts off the story and positions the main character as this OP protagonist, and he's very, very strong, like ridiculously strong, they kind of build a story that you feel is going to be a little bit closer to maybe the beginning after the end, for example, where a character goes through a long, like, protracted storyline. But actually, the time jumps happen pretty quickly in this one, and you realize that this is much more a story about politics than a story about a mage getting revenge. Even though it leads to that, it's not the hyper focus. This is not hyper action focus. There's a lot of dialogue. Some of the art is really visual, and I don't think that's a huge problem for the story. I just think it has an identity issue. Like, it tries to be both things, but doesn't do neither of them well. The relationships are not particularly compelling, despite them having introduced some stuff early on that seemed like they would be. And no, overall, I think it was just a disappointment as a series. If you're really enjoying 8 Circle Mage, I'm curious to see what it is about it that you like so much. Because for me, I dropped it maybe 15 chapters ago. I was still reading it week to week as like a self-pain infliction kind of thing, and it was always continuously disappointing me. But I was like, yeah, you know what? Like, it's a manhwa, it's pretty, there's still really cool magic shit. I'll enjoy it, but nah, it's game over now. I'm done with it. Guys, if you made it this far in the video, that means you're probably enjoying it, which means you can maybe drop me a like and a subscribe down below, which would be awesome. At number 5 is one that breaks my heart. Tales of Demons and Gods. I still read it week to week, and a lot of the time I'm like scrolling through the chapter and I'm like, what is going on? I have no idea. And it's not because I don't follow the story. Actually, I've praised Tales of Demons and Gods for being one of the best Chinese manhwas at world building. It has one of the most complex worlds with most races, interactions, power system. It's really interesting, and it's particularly in the Chinese manhwa space, there's a huge lack of diversity in power systems, There's a lot of God, I'm forgetting the name of the. Basically, it's they escalate in these different realms, and there is an aspect of that to the story. However, there's a complexity to the system that makes it interesting around these demon beasts that they kind of contract with. They're not contracted, but anyway, they kind of capture, and it makes it more interesting and like make the fights kind of more dynamic. And the art is good. The main protagonist, honestly, is one of my favorite main protagonists out there, but the world is too big. And the story has completely meandered and lost its way to where it is. It's such a disappointment when you consider that if you blitz through the first, I don't know, 100-something chapters, you're going to be like, wow, this is a great story of characters protecting friends, building relationships, fighting strong enemies. Yes, the main character is OP in his own right, but there's tons of people stronger than him. He's just smart. He's not even growing at the same speed as his friends, but he's helping them to grow so he doesn't lose them along the way. Yeah, I know. Some of these storylines come out a lot, but the fact that it was so fantastic and that it's really meandered just shows something about the creator of the story. And I have another manhwa from him on this list, unfortunately, and that is when he gets to a certain point, I feel like the ambition of his story overwhelms and gets to a point where it gets very convoluted. It may not be the creator's problem, but from what I've heard from different sources, it seems to be something that's kind of par for the course in his writing from his light novel stuff. At number 4 is The Undefeatable Swordsman. Actually, I feel like this one is slept on more than it should be. Technically, The Undefeatable Swordsman for a good while should have been top 10 for most people reading it. The sword fighting is phenomenal. The art is really cool. It's this dark and gritty world, but also with a protagonist that's endlessly hopeful. There's some great storyline moments of a character overcoming his challenges, getting revenge, all these different things, and it felt a little different, to be honest, from a storyline perspective than your typical story. However, there's a point in the story, and I can't even tell you exactly when it occurred, when, once again, the world gets a bit too big and a bit too strange for the type of story they were originally telling. They're particularly more recently in some chapters that took place in regards to certain characters perishing and certain other characters being infected by demonic energy and stuff like that, which is not rare in Manhwa. But in the context of this story, it just went in a direction that felt like it was doing something very different than what they sold us at the start. And maybe I'm actually wrong about this, and I do believe I could be wrong about this, because the enjoyment of the series just fell off a cliff, which is surprising because unlike most manhwa, the protagonist of this one is a lot of fun to follow. He's an interesting protagonist with an interesting personality. He has some issues. Where there's this inner turmoil of if he's gonna become this almost evil character, and his level of brutality is kind of pretty crazy, and the characters in this world are insanely strong, cruel, and there's just some great stuff going on. But a lot of my enjoyment is gone from this one, guys. I'm curious, for those of you that have read this at all, are you still reading it? And what do you think about where it's gone over the past little while? At number 3 is Star Martial God Technique. Star Martial God Technique is the other story written by the same creator as Tales of Demons and Gods, and it shows. Because the first larger arc, was actually super solid. And then it falls off of the biggest deep end because of... It's almost like a story where someone told you, oh yeah, it ends at the end of season 1, and then it gets renewed for season 2 all of a sudden, and they're like, okay, the main character is alive, and then they do something. And that happens, basically, in Star Martial God Technique. The story just ends, and then they continue it, which was so weird. And also, that ending felt so rushed in the story without, tying up all the loose ends, that I honestly feel like they should have added 20 chapters to that, fleshed it out, and just ended the series. And this is another one that's just like God of High School, where the first arc was like amazingly solid, comes to an end, and then just continues on when it should have been like, shh, you need to stop now. It's good. Don't do anymore. But no, that's not the case, and we have this one. At number 2, we have what I'm going to get so much hate for because I know how much some people love this manhwa, and that's Martial Peak. And don't tell me I haven't read enough of it. I've still read about 2,800 chapters of it or something like that. 1,800, 2,800? Anyway, I only dropped it maybe like 4 months ago, 5 months ago, something like that. This manhwa releases just for your, like, because that feels like a lot of chapters, and it is. Chapters are significantly shorter than your average manhwa chapter, and also they release on average 2 to 3 a day. So like it's a lot of content that comes out every day, so it makes a lot of chapters very quickly. When it starts, it's really good. Yankai is a character. He's not I don't find him that interesting as a character. And he's not a particularly deep character, despite having so many situations happen to him. You might disagree with me on the depth thing, but to be honest, most of the story is about events, not people. And this is kind of one of the things that for me I was just fed up of eventually. Because everything is disposable in the story because it's too big of a story. In this story, characters go to these additional further realms. Basically, you'd have like Earth and space and like the equivalent of this. And then you have the universe and the world keeps growing and keeps getting bigger. And ironically, as much as that's the case, I don't think it has that great world building because from a world perspective, they're very disposable. Everything is like there's a harem of characters, of female characters that have like one trait to them that make them part of this harem largely. That's not important through the whole series, thank the Lord, but it basically goes and just has events happen. He found a cave. There's a magic power in the cave. He gets that power. He needs to fight this person. He fights that person. He moves on. But like there's very little like true storyline. There are arcs in the story where there were some storylines, particularly early on, where there was like a battle for succession a little bit in his family, and I would argue that was the best arc of the series. And that one actually had kind of an end goal. There was some interesting stuff that happened, but beyond after that, it just goes to hell. Like it's just a weird freaking series that goes everywhere. I'm done with it. If you still love it, you think I'm an idiot and I'm wrong, leave your comment down below and hit me with it. I'm perfectly open to you being wrong as well. At number 1, I'm going to give you 2 actually at number 1, and this is Return of the Crazy Demon and Bowblade Spirit. Both of them for completely different reasons. Return of the Crazy Demon, honestly, hasn't disappointed. It's been exactly the same manhwa since the beginning. There's no inconsistencies. However, it's a great example of you can have too much of a good thing. Because in the case of Return of the Crazy Demon, the main protagonist is crazy. He says it himself. He's clearly a little disconnected, and that's part of the humor, the very dark humor of the story, that he could kill anyone at any time. And honestly, it was really refreshing when I started reading the manga. It's beautiful, the fights are amazing, but a character that his motivations are kind of just doing what he wants kind of gets stale pretty quickly when, like, even though there is a goal, an overarching goal to the story, he doesn't seem particularly motivated towards that goal. I see it kind of the same way as like you're playing an RPG where there's clearly a storyline you're supposed to be following, but you only care about the side quests. However, if you were going to make a manhwa where you just care about the side quests, it probably wouldn't be that interesting. And you're going to tell me like, yes, all those people he defeats are related to the main quest. Yes, they are. However, the reality is his disinterest in the main storyline is kind of part of it. And also there's a level of convenience of things happening in the story that it's a bit much. People just attack him all the time. All the time. No one talks. No one talks in this universe to tell each other like you should not F with this guy. And of course, it creates situations where people get destroyed, underestimate him, and blah, blah, blah. And honestly, there's fights. The fights are phenomenal. And just for that reason, I have kept reading it, and I'm still up to date on it. I still get some enjoyment out of it. But when I see all my chapters update, it's like last on the list, because while it still delivers the same thing as it originally did, it's a little stale at this point. On the Bowblade Spirit side, it's a different tale entirely. Because this story is like a bunch of like vignettes or parts of a story stuck together in a way. And it's okay. It shifts rather well. Like, you have that beginning arc, which is much more comedy oriented, about the character getting trained, and eventually he finds this bow and sword and blah, 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 and all these things. And his real quest begins. Sure, no problem. Technically, stories like Naruto and stuff like that do similar things. And the story becomes a bit more serious with still comedy interjected, and it goes a certain direction. And later in the story, there's a child introduced into the story. And I won't give spoilers for people that enjoy it. But honestly, from that point on, it ruined the story for me. It completely changed the motives for what was going on and just added annoyance. Like, it's like getting a quest in an RPG that's just not interesting. It really killed all the joy of that one for me. If you like the video, please take time to like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that. And beyond that, leave a comment down below on what you thought about this and on some future content that I could do on this channel.